All right, everybody. Coming at you a little bit earlier today because I got things to do, man. But today's episode, 125, we're going to talk about misbehaving agents and brokers. So every year, the state of Ohio releases a list of agents and brokers who were punished the previous year because of violating various licensing law. For the sake of privacy, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name brokerages, people, places. I'm not going to do that simply because this isn't really about shaming and bashing other people. It's more for entertainment for you, certainly for me. But we're going to talk about the types of things that agents and brokers get in trouble for, the frequency of those violations, and we'll end off with a couple of salacious stories for you. Okay, so there were 48 total disciplinary actions taken by the state, specifically the Ohio Division of Real Estate, against people here in the state of Ohio in 2025. 21 women and 27 men received sanctions or penalties from the state of Ohio. The penalties are obviously fines. The largest fine of last year was $5,000. A few people received that fine. There are suspensions and there are revocations from licenses. So suspensions you see anywhere between 3 days and 6 months. Revocations anywhere from 6 months to permanent, right? So the difference between a suspension and a revocation is if your license is suspended, it's suspended for a certain amount of time and then automatically reinstated when that suspension ends. If it's revoked, well, that means there's two types of revocation, right? There's a temporary and a permanent revocation. So a revocation means they're pulling your license in and you cannot practice, right? You can't practice under suspension, but with a revocation for a temporary, you have to complete a certain amount of requirements for them to reinstate your license. And if you don't get your license back. And obviously with a permanent revocation, the state's just like, you know what, we're done. We're taking your license away. You can't practice real estate any longer in the state of Ohio because we think you suck and we don't trust you to treat people right. Okay, so there were 2 permanent revocations and there were 2 temporary revocations happening. So a lot of what the majority of these violations and penalties have to do with agency. So agency really, it boils down to what we do as realtors and real estate agents, right? This is the representation of a principal client in the transaction, the sale or the purchase of a property. Okay, so it's really it boils down to what we do. We have certain fiduciary duties as a licensed agent. We have to be professional and competent in what we do. We have to maintain confidentiality. We have to obey what our clients tell us to do, as long as what they're telling us to do is legal and ethical, right? So these are the certain fiduciary responsibilities that we have towards the people. And we also have to account for their monies in a very responsible manner. And if we don't do these things, we're violating our agency. Also, it's important that we let people know right off the rip the different types of agencies that we practice. We got to let them know in the course of a transaction who represents who, so that everyone knows, okay, this is the person representing me in my best interest, not that person. They're on the other side of this. All right. So some of the things, the agency violations that we saw, there were a couple people, actually 4, who were dual parties to a transaction without notifying people that they were dual agents in a transaction without notifying either party that they are dual agents. There were also a handful of people, a couple of them brokers, which really blows my mind, who were buying a property for themselves and didn't disclose that they were licensed by the state. This is kind of elementary stuff, especially if you're a broker. And I have to imagine that, considering I know one of these guys, it was just a mistake and oversight, didn't put the right language on his disclosures, got through it, and then was, oh shit, got in trouble, right? There were people busted for not prioritizing the interest of clients. A lot of stuff about paperwork, not having the right signatures in the right place, not collecting the right documents in the right amount of time, not having very good documentation set up inside their office. They were a handful of people who were acting like a broker and managing properties. You're not allowed to do that, guys. If you're a licensee as a salesperson, you're not allowed to manage properties unless you're doing it through a broker and through that brokerage. Okay. Um, not providing a consumer guide or documentation in time, right? There were a couple brokers who were allowing suspended licensees to practice real estate in their suspension. They got busted for that. There were obviously licensees who got busted practicing real estate while suspended. The state actually fined one person. I meant to say this earlier and I forgot. 16 brokers, 31 salespeople, and one unlicensed person all got sanctions from the state. The one unlicensed person was acting like they had a license, and they were conducting activities that are only allowed by a licensed real estate salesperson or broker, and they got in trouble for that. So if you're selling your own property, you don't have to have a license. If you're selling property on behalf of another person, you have to be licensed in the state of Ohio. And of course, if you're selling on behalf of another person, if you only have a sales license, that license has to be kept with a broker and run through a brokerage. Only a broker, can sort of operate independently like that. So those were a lot of agency things. Some of the ethical things that people got in trouble for. One person opened a client's email or a client's mail. They went to their seller's property, took the mail out, opened it up, read through it, and then called their seller and said, "Hey, you got mail from this person. This is what it says. Maybe you should respond to that." Seller kind of got pissed. "Why are you going through my mail?" and reported him, right? Little aside here, when so many of these things come to light, and I would say probably 90% plus come to light because there's a breakdown in the relationship between the agent and or the broker and their customer, right? They're not taking care of their customer. They're not communicating to their customer. They're not taking care of their people. Somebody gets pissed off and complains to the state. That's how these things come to light. See, in real estate, we're a self-policing industry. So the people who are filing these complaints with the state are either customers who are angry or real estate agents and or brokers complaining about one another. And oftentimes, I got to say, we probably don't do it enough. There's a lot of shitty agents out there. We all know this. I mean, you got half of agents doing absolutely no business every single year. What are they learning? How are they getting better at this craft, at this practice? They're not doing anything. And then all of a sudden they have an uncle or a cousin or somebody come to them and they got to, we're going to have you sell our house or help us buy. They don't know what they're doing and they screw things up, right? And when they screw things up and people get mad, especially when people lose money, that's quick to piss people off, right? Then that's how these things get reported to the state, all right? But I did say 16 brokers got spanked by the state of Ohio last year. You don't get to become a broker unless you got some experience. So shame on you guys, right? Anyways, ethical things. There were 2 incidences in the state where people had an ethical violation that had nothing to do with real estate at all, but they committed a felony, one being a forgery, one being the felony was not quite undisclosed, but they committed a felony. Word got to the Division of Real Estate, and the Division of Real Estate took action about these licensees who did something that had nothing to do with real estate at all. But part of our canon of ethics here in the state of Ohio is that we're supposed to be professional at all times. We're supposed to behave appropriately and conduct ourselves appropriately and becoming of a professional at all times. And if you go out and break the law and get in trouble, the Division of Real Estate can put it on you. One agent received a referral and failed to disclose that they received a referral. It was agreed upon with the other agent that they were going to do this referral. The other agent actually sent the referral paperwork to them, but they never signed it, never sent it back, didn't disclose it, took the money and tried not to pay that referral fee. Here's another fun one. An agent here in the state, they told their client that they were going to rebate some of the commission, right? So we're going to reduce our commission for you in order to get this deal done. And then the deal got done. This person never filed an inducement addendum saying, because if we're going to reduce our commission to make a deal happen, we're supposed to disclose that to all parties. We're inducing someone into the sale by giving them something of value. And when you rebate your commission, in this case, it was like $1,400. When you rebate that back, that is $1,400 of value that you have to disclose to all parties, right? This person not only didn't disclose it, but then they tried not to give that rebate to the client. And of course, the client reported him, as they should have, because basically at that point, you're kind of stealing from them. What are you doing, man? People refusing to disclose material defects about a property that they're selling. One person got their license revoked by the state, and a few others had their license suspended because they had violations. The state asked for information, documentation regarding the case, and they absolutely refused to comply, right? We're about to wrap this up. You kind of get the point, right? One of my favorite ones, actually two of my favorite ones, there was an agent who got mad at another agent, and she went out on social media and talked mad shit about the other agent and just slammed her, and it ended up getting reported. And you can't do that, guys. You can't go on social media and name names and trash somebody without expecting some sort of blowback. I mean, that is, again, it's a matter of ethics. It's, when you sign on for the canon of ethics, you say you're not going to do that. You're not going to go out and lambaste other agents in public, no matter how crappy they might have been. Here's another one. A guy opened up his own brokerage. Upon leaving the brokerage that he was with, he went into their Google Drive and basically stole a ton of intellectual property, converted it. When I say converted it, I mean he took their logo off and put his on, and then used all of their intellectual property for training purposes, for recruitment purposes, and it was carbon copy stuff. And the old brokerage saw this and said, we're not going to let that fly. And they reported him to the state, and that guy took a spanking from the state of Ohio. So the best story that I have, and this actually happened in 2024, but I didn't do this last year. I'm going to do this every year about this time when these new lists come out. But the most fun story is Mr. and Mrs. Green were out. They had showings booked at their property, and they were out. Obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Green is a fictitious name. I'm not going to talk about where this was, but anyways, Mr. and Mrs. Green was out, and they were eating dinner, doing some shopping while these showings were booked. And they came home, and they decided to review the security footage to see what, the families or the people look like. They were looking at security footage to see the people who came through their house. Of course, they're going to do that. Everybody's going to do that. And they should, because, you never know what's going on. Well, they're reviewing the security footage, and they found that the showing agent brought his girlfriend to their house and had sex in their bed while they were out at dinner. Now, the showing agent was polite enough to make their bed after they left so that it looked mostly what it looked like when they arrived there. But how horrifying would that be, folks, to come home and pull up your security system on the laptop and see Mr. Agent and his girl getting it on in your bed while you're out to dinner? Wow. Okay, that wraps up the big stuff for this week. Let's get into the statistics of last week's sales. Give me a minute here to share the screen. Let me pull these up. We'll blow through these real quick and we'll get on with our day. All right, there it is. Here we are, episode 125. As you can see, inventory has shrunk every week, basically since the beginning of the year. The very first week, this is actually the last week of December, first week of January here. This was a Friday here, it was the second. And then we had this jump up in inventory, and it has gotten smaller week by week by week by week. And I've been saying this for years, guys. Pricing is a matter of inventory, right? Supply and demand is the foundation of pricing. It's the foundation of price discovery. Economists will dive real deep into why and what affects supply and demand, talk about demand and supply and elasticity in markets, blah, blah, blah. We don't need to get that deep because supply and demand is the tell-all, right? When you have a balance between supply and demand, you have a balanced market. When demand outpaces supply, you have a seller's market. And when supply outpaces demand, you have a buyer's market. That is as generic as I can make it. Well, we have had basically since 2020, since the government artificially created a market by dropping interest rates to nothing, we have had a supply-demand issue. And as much as demand has taken a hit over the last 9 months, and it has, and we can feel it, it's past few years, past 2 years, especially all-time low sales recorded, blah, blah, blah. There's still such small supply, such a small inventory that it's been able to not only keep prices higher and stable and higher, but they continue to appreciate. Now we've seen a correction or Q4. It's going to take time to see whether or not we rebound from that. We always see a correction in pricing in the winter. It always comes down a bit. Demand always comes down a bit. But as we ramp up here into selling season, we'll see what happens. So anyways, inventory, there were 416 units that is single family and condos that were sold, or I'm sorry, those were available on the market today in Lorain County. There were 53 closed sales last week. The median square feet of each of those homes sold was 1,588. Median sale price was $250,000. Median price per square foot, $160.75. So you can see that remains low throughout this winter. Again, we see a correction every single winter. We see prices come down. We see number of sales come down, number of listings come down every single winter. So we will see, again, as we get into Q2 and we head long towards the summer, if these square foot prices change, because this is our real-time indicator what's going on with prices, all right? Average time on market for homes sold last week, 47 days. You can see these numbers have gotten up there a little bit. That is a reflection on sinking demand in the winter months. That said, a 6% was the interest rate on a 30-year conventional note this morning when I took a look. I don't think we can blame interest rates for having a big effect on market demand anymore. As you can see, not only have they been pretty stable between 6 and 6.5, they have steadily lowered over time, right? I mean, I'm going all the way back to the fall of last year when, we're in August when we're seeing 6.5%, September 6.5%. From that point, they have steadily lowered and lowered and lowered and lowered and lowered. And yet we have seen demand lower. It's not interest rates, guys. I think a lot of people are scared about what's going on economically, what's going on, with government policy, blah, blah, blah. I think inflation it's really kicked a lot of people's ass the past couple of years. People's wages certainly have not followed suit, and things just cost more. Everything costs more. We all know this, from eggs to milk to building supplies, clothing, insurance, everything costs more, and people aren't making any more than they were 2 years ago, by and large. And I think that's had an effect. But as we get into selling season, as people start to get their tax returns, as people are starting to see the last day of school come into sight, and they need to plan about getting their house on the market and getting their kids into that new school district, or, all those factors that really come into play during the selling season. Let's see what happens in regards to these supply and demand dynamics. The large sale last week, $607,000 in Avon Lake. Not only did I not, it was new construction. There was only one picture, and it wasn't even a real picture. It was a rendering. So nothing to show you there. That, my friends, wraps up episode 125 of Real Estate Bites. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Again, scan that QR code. Go to the YouTube channel. Subscribe. Send your friends there. Send them links. Coming at you every week with some good information regarding real estate here in the state of Ohio. A lot of the stuff that we talk about can be extrapolated over the Midwest. I think the stats that I pull, they're a pretty good sample size for what's going on in the Midwestern real estate market. There's more than that too. We talk a lot about everything real estate here on Real Estate Bites. Coming at you most Fridays on the lunch hour. As always, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. I love you, people. I'll see you next week.